You're just jealous because she's going places, Mum hissed. That's when I decided they'd regret every last word. I'm Olivia, the responsible one, the reliable one, the boring one. At least that's what my family has branded me since I was old enough to balance a checkbook, which, by the way, was age 12. While other kids were having sleepovers, I was learning to manage our household budget because Mom was too busy managing my sister, Tessa's modelling portfolio. This is the opportunity of a lifetime, Tessa announced at our weekly family dinner, her perfectly manicured hands clutching her rose gold iPhone 14 Pro. I already have 3,000 followers. Mallory says with the right equipment and strategy, I could hit 1 million by next year. I stabbed at my salmon, already knowing where this was heading. Mallory was Tessa's latest mentor, a mid-tier influencer who charged astronomical fees for her exclusive coaching program. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Mom beamed, reaching across the table to squeeze Tessa's hand. Tell us more about the plan. Well, Tessa's eyes sparkled with that familiar look, the one that always preceded someone else opening their wallet. I need to invest in myself. Professional camera equipment, lighting, a small studio space. Plus, travel content is huge right now. Mallory says... How much? I interrupted, earning a sharp look from Dad. Tessa bit her lip, playing innocent. Around 60,000. I choked on my wine. $60,000? Are you insane? Olivia! Mom's voice could cut glass. Your sister is trying to build something here. This is an investment in her future. Her future as what? Another wannabe influencer drowning in debt? I've done the math, Tessa pouted, pulling up a spreadsheet on her phone. Once I hit 50,000 followers, the brand deals start rolling in. Mallory makes 6 figures from her partnerships. Dad cleared his throat. We've discussed this with Tessa, and we think it's a solid plan. The only issue is... He glanced at Mom. The banks won't approve such a large personal loan for someone her age. But if you co-sign, absolutely not. I pushed my plate away. I've spent years building my credit score. I'm not risking it on this scheme. Scheme? Tessa's eyes welled up right on cue. This is my dream, Olivia. Why do you always have to rain on everything? Because someone has to be realistic. You've never held a real job. You dropped out of community college. And now you want to gamble 60 grand on becoming Instagram famous. You work at a bank, Mom interjected. You understand finance. That's why you're perfect for this. Your sister needs you. I laughed bitterly. Funny how I'm suddenly perfect when you need my signature. I knew she'd be like this, Tessa sniffled. She's always been jealous of me, ever since we were kids. That's not fair, Tessa, Dad said weakly, but his eyes pleaded with me to give in. Always the peacekeeper, never the parent. Jealous? I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood. I've worked my ass off for everything I have. I paid my own way through college. I saved for my own apartment. Meanwhile, you've handed her everything on a silver platter, and she still wants more. We support our children's dreams in this family, Mum declared, her voice ice cold. But I suppose you wouldn't understand that, since you never dreamed bigger than pushing papers at a desk. The room went silent. Even Tessa looked uncomfortable. I'll think about it, I said quietly, grabbing my purse. But don't hold your breath. Olivia, wait, Dad called after me, but I was already heading for the door. Later that night, the texts started rolling in. Tessa, I can't believe you're being so selfish. This could change my life. Mum, your father and I are very disappointed in your attitude. Dad, please, call us. We can work something out. I turned off my phone and poured myself another glass of wine. As I stood at my apartment window, watching the city lights flicker, Something shifted inside me. Years of being the family ATM, the responsible one, the boring one, it all crystallized into a single clear thought. They wanted my signature? Fine. But this time I'd make sure the fine print worked in my favour. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Uriel Steele, attorney at law. We'd gone to college together, and he owed me a favour. Hey, Yuri, it's Olivia. Remember that time I helped you ace financial law? I need some advice about loan agreements and collateral clauses. Sometimes the best revenge isn't saying no, it's saying yes, and waiting for them to realise what they've actually signed up for. I signed the papers under their watchful eyes, but only one of us knew the truth hidden on page 7. 2 days earlier, I'd met Uriel at a quiet coffee shop downtown, far from my family's usual haunts. He raised an eyebrow as I slid the draft loan agreement across the table. Hypothetically speaking, I began, if someone was forced to co-sign a loan they knew would default. Hypothetically, Uriel smirked, scanning the document. This is oddly specific for a hypothetical situation, Liv. Just help me understand my options. He leaned back, coffee forgotten. Well, your hypothetical person could refuse to sign, or they could add conditions, like requiring collateral against their portion of the liability. Collateral? I sat up straighter. What kind of collateral? Property, usually. Something of equal value to secure the debt. He studied my face. Your family still owns that rental property on Oak Street, right? My heart raced. How would someone hypothetically add that kind of clause? Carefully, he warned, and with proper legal language. Here. He pulled out a pen and started drafting on a napkin. My phone buzzed. Another text from Tessa. Just ordered my first ring light. Can't wait to start creating content. Haska blessed. I turned the phone face down. Show me exactly what to write. Back in the present, I watched Mum's perfectly manicured finger trace down each page of the contract. Everything looks in order, she announced, passing it to Dad. Are you sure you don't want to read it more carefully? I asked innocently. There's a lot of legal terminology. Oh, please. Tessa rolled her eyes from her perch on the couch. We trust you, Miss Bank Executive. Stop being so dramatic. I caught my reflection in the window. Calm, collected, almost serene. Inside, my heart was pounding. I just want to make sure everyone understands their obligations, I said, voice steady. Especially regarding default scenarios and collateral requirements. Yes, Mum waved dismissively. We've been over this. Now, Tessa needs the funds transferred by Monday to secure her studio space. Dad signed without reading, as I knew he would. His fountain pen scratched across the signature line. The same pen he'd used to sign all of Tessa's modelling contracts, her private school tuition, her failed business ventures. There, he smiled, sliding the contract back to me. All done. Family supporting family, just as it should be. I carefully tucked the papers into my briefcase. I'll file these tomorrow. The bank should process everything within 48 hours. Perfect! Tessa squealed, already typing on her phone. Mallory says we can start the branding workshop next week. Later that night, my phone lit up with Instagram notifications. Tessa had posted a tearful thank you video. So blessed to have a family that believes in me. Big things coming. Shabayiju influencer life. Sai blessed ju dreams come true. The comments rolled in. Can't wait to see your journey. You deserve this queen. Following for the content. My friend Evelyn from work texted, She's really milking this, huh? I replied, Just wait. The next morning, I walked into the bank early before my regular shift. Sandra in loans knew me well enough not to ask questions when I handed her the notarized agreement. Everything's in order, I said. Please make sure all the clauses are entered exactly as written. She nodded, already typing. The funds should be available by tomorrow. Perfect. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Sandra, flag page 7 for special attention during processing. It's important that section is properly recorded. Of course, honey. I'll handle it personally. Walking to my desk, I passed the bank's wall of motivational quotes. One caught my eye. Patience is not the ability to wait, but the ability to keep a good attitude while waiting. I smiled. I'd been patient for 28 years. I could be patient a little longer. My phone buzzed. Tessa had tagged me in another post. Shopping for camera equipment with my amazing big sis. She believes in me so much, she helped make my dreams come true. You blessed shaman sister love. I clicked like and added a heart emoji comment. Let her enjoy her moment. Let them all bask in their certainty that they'd won again, that reliable Olivia had fallen in line like always. The modified clause on page 7 was my own little time bomb, ticking away silently. 3 months, maybe 4, before Tessa's investment imploded, before the payment notices started, before they discovered exactly what they'd signed. I opened my email to find a message from Uriel. Documents filed. You sure about this? Absolutely, I typed back. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way. Then I turned to my actual work, humming quietly. After all, I had a reputation for being the responsible one to maintain. One night, Mum called me. No pleasantries, just, you need to fix this. I nearly laughed. 3 months had passed in a blur of Instagram stories and TikTok dances. I'd watched it all unfold from a safe distance, counting down the days. First came the shopping sprees. Designer outfits for content creation, top-of-the-line camera equipment, ring lights that cost more than my first car, then the rented spaces. Tessa's studio turned out to be a luxury apartment she'd leased for shooting lifestyle content. It's all about aesthetic, she'd explained during one of our mandatory family dinners. Nobody wants to see regular apartment content. Mallory, her influencer mentor, encouraged every expense. Invest in yourself, she preached during their weekly coaching calls. You can't attract abundance with a poverty mindset. The first warning sign came when Tessa's engagement numbers plateaued. Their algorithm hates me, she whined during a family brunch. Mallory says I need to pivot to luxury travel content. Of course, sweetheart, Mum cooed. Where are you thinking? Dubai first, then maybe the Maldives. Mallory says, how much is left in the account? I interrupted, stirring my coffee. Tessa's face clouded. That's not your business. Actually, as co-signer, it is. Mom shot me a warning look. Tessa knows what she's doing. Don't you trust your sister? I smiled thinly. Trust has nothing to do with basic math. 2 weeks later, Mallory ghosted. Her coaching program disappeared, along with her Instagram account. Tessa was devastated. She was my mentor, she sobbed during an emergency family meeting. Now, I have to rebuild my whole strategy. What about the brand deal she promised? Dad asked quietly. I noticed new worry lines around his eyes. They fell through, but I just need to pivot. Maybe luxury real estate tours I could... When's the last time you made a loan payment? I asked. Silence fell over the room. Tessa suddenly became very interested in her phone. Tessa? Dad's voice sharpened. The payments? I was investing in growth, she protested. Mallory said content creators have to spend money to make money. How many payments have you missed? Mom demanded. Just 3, maybe 4. But once I hit my stride, my phone buzzed. A notification from the bank's loan department. I opened it, already knowing what I'd find. Default notice, I announced. Looks like they're moving to collect. Well, you'll have to help her, Mum snapped. You're the co-signer. This affects your credit too. I took a slow sip of water. Actually, you might want to check page 7 of the agreement. What's on page 7? Dad asked. Oh, just a clause about collateral requirements in case of default. Nothing major. I stood up, gathering my purse. You should probably dig out your copy and review it. Olivia? Mum's voice held a note of panic I'd never heard before. What did you do? Me, I just protected my interests, like any good financial professional would. I headed for the door. Better find those papers quick. Bank moves fast on defaults. Wait! Tessa called after me. You can't just leave. We need to figure this out. I turned back. You know what's funny? Your latest Instagram post about manifesting abundance has more engagement than any of your sponsored content ever did. Maybe that's the universe trying to tell you something. My phone kept buzzing as I drove home. Texts poured in. Tessa, this isn't fair. You have to help me. Mum, call us immediately. This is unacceptable. Dad, please, let's discuss this as a family. I ignored them all and called Evelyn instead. How'd it go? She asked. About how you'd expect. They're just realising actions have consequences. And the property clause? They haven't found it yet, but they will. I smiled into the darkness. Want to grab a drink? I have a feeling my phone's going to be very busy tonight. At the bar, Evelyn raised her glass. To Karma. To page 7, I counted. My phone lit up again. Tessa had gone live on Instagram, mascara running down her face. Sometimes the people closest to you can be the most toxic, she sobbed to her dwindling followers. I turned the phone face down and ordered another round. The real show hadn't even started yet. Soon they'd find the clause, realise what it meant, understand exactly what they'd signed away with their careless signatures. You know they'll never forgive you, Evelyn said softly. I thought about years of being the responsible one, the reliable one, the boring one, about watching them throw money at Tessa's dreams while I worked overtime to pay my student loans. Good, I replied, because I'm done forgiving them. I said, so glad you brought up paperwork. I went to my room and came back with the contract and a yellow highlighter. The pounding on my apartment door started at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. I'd been expecting them. The bank's final notice had arrived yesterday. Olivia, open this door right now. Mum's voice carried through the hallway like a fire alarm. I took my time, sipping my coffee, checking my hair in the mirror. When I finally opened the door, they burst in like a storm front. Mum in her designer suit, Dad looking haggard, Tessa with puffy eyes and yesterday's makeup. The bank is threatening to take action, Dad said, pacing my living room. We need to figure this out. Figure what out? I settled into my favourite armchair. The terms were quite clear. Clear? Tessa shrieked. They're saying something about property liens. They can't do that. Actually, they can, and they will. I set my coffee down. Would you like to see the exact clause? Don't you dare act smug, Mum hissed. This is your fault. If you had just helped your sister properly, I laughed, like co-signing a blank cheque for her influencer fantasy. Speaking of which, how many followers did you end up with, Tessa? That's not fair. The algorithm. Still blaming the algorithm? Not the $12,000 you spent on that Dubai trip? Or the $5,000 coaching fee Mallory charged before disappearing? You've always been jealous, Tessa sniffled. You couldn't stand seeing me succeed. Succeed? I stood up, walking to my home office. Let's talk about success. I returned with a folder, spreading documents across my coffee table. Bank statements, loan agreements, default notices. Here's your success by the numbers. $60,000 gone in 3 months, $0 in brand deals, 4 missed payments. I tapped each paper for emphasis. And one very important clause about collateral. Dad grabbed the loan agreement, flipping pages frantically. Where is it? What clause? Page 7, I said sweetly. The one you all signed without reading. Mom snatched the contract, her face going pale as she found the highlighted section. In the event of default, the co-signer's liability shall be secured against property at 742 Oak Street. Her voice trailed off. Our rental property? Dad whispered. You put a lien against our rental property. No, I corrected, you did. When you signed without reading, just like you always sign whatever Tessa puts in front of you. You tricked us! Tessa jumped up, mascara running again. This is fraud. Actually, I pulled out one final document, Uriel's notarized statement. Everything was completely legal. You all signed willingly. I even suggested you read it carefully, remember? We're your family, Mum's voice cracked. How could you do this to us? Family? I felt something snap inside. Was it family when you made me work through high school to pay for Tessa's modelling classes? When you refinanced your house to fund her fashion line but couldn't help with my college tuition? That was different, Dad started. Different how? Because Tessa was the golden child? Because her dreams mattered more than my reality? I stood up, suddenly tired of all of it. Well, now reality is calling. The bank wants its money. We'll fight this, Mum declared. We'll get lawyers. With what money? I gestured to the statements. Tessa's broke, the loan's in default, and your precious rental property is about to become bank property. I'll never forgive you for this, Tessa sobbed. Funny, I smiled as that's exactly how I felt every time you took and took and took, knowing I'd be forced to give. What do you want? Dad asked quietly. There must be something. I want you to leave. I want you to deal with this mess yourselves. And I want you to finally understand that actions have consequences. You've ruined us, Mom whispered. No, I opened my apartment door. You did that yourselves. I just stopped preventing it. They filed out slowly, defeated. Tessa paused in the doorway. I really thought I could make it work. I know, I said softly, that's the problem. You always think things will work out because someone else always pays the price. After they left, I poured another coffee and checked my phone. Tessa had already posted a new video. Sometimes toxic family members show their true colours. Shock family trauma, shock betrayal. The comments were not what she expected. Girl, you blew 60K on Instagram photos. Maybe get a real job? This is why you read contracts. I closed the app and called Evelyn. They found out about page 7, I said. How'd they take it? I looked around my quiet apartment, thinking about the years of peace ahead. No more family emergencies, no more financial rescues, no more being the responsible one. They took it exactly how you'd expect, I replied. Like people who never learned that no means no. Until now, Evelyn said. Until now, I agreed. Tessa said, You loopholed us? I looked her dead in the eye. No, I protected myself. You loopholed yourself. The bank's conference room felt too small for the amount of tension it contained. Their lawyer, Mr. Patterson, sat at one end of the table, methodically arranging documents. My family huddled at the other end, with Uriel and me in the middle. Neutral territory, though nothing about this was neutral anymore. Let's review the situation, Patterson began, adjusting his glasses. The loan has defaulted. Standard procedure requires us to pursue collection through the designated collateral channels. This is ridiculous, Mom interrupted. There must be some mistake. That property has been in our family for 20 years. The documentation is quite clear. Patterson slid a paper across the table. The property was offered as collateral, with all parties' signatures properly notarized. We never agreed to that. Tessa's voice cracked. Actually, Uriel spoke up, pulling out his own copy. You did. right here in what we call the security clause. Would you like me to read it? This is your fault, Mum hissed at me. You knew exactly what you were doing. Yes, I met her gaze steadily. Just like you knew exactly what you were doing when you pressured me to co-sign. Ladies, Patterson cleared his throat, the bank's position is straightforward. Either the loan balance is paid in full within 30 days, or we begin proceedings to claim the collateral property. Dad slumped in his chair. How much to clear it? Current balance with penalties and interest, $78,422. Tessa gasped, but the loan was only $60,000. Interest accrues daily, Patterson explained, plus the missed payment penalties. I can get the money, Tessa declared. I just need time to build my platform. Your platform? I couldn't help laughing. Your last post got 12 likes, Tessa. 12. And 3 were from Mum's bridge club. This isn't funny, she snapped. This is my life. No, I leaned forward. This is reality. Something you've been sheltered from your entire life. But guess what? Reality doesn't care about your dreams or your followers or your aesthetic. Ms. Ryan, Patterson interrupted, addressing Mum. The bank requires your decision today. Will you be paying the balance, or shall we proceed with the property claim? Mum's perfectly manicured hands trembled as she reached for her designer purse. We need to discuss this with our own lawyer. Of course. Patterson gathered his papers. You have 24 hours to notify us of your decision. After that, we move forward automatically. As everyone stood to leave, Tessa grabbed my arm. You have to help us. You're my sister. I gently removed her hand. I am your sister, but I'm not your safety net anymore. You loopholed us? Her voice was small, confused. All this time you knew this would happen? No, I protected myself. You loopholed yourself. There's a difference. In the parking lot, Dad tried one last time. Olivia, please. We can work something out. Family shouldn't do a lot of things, I cut him off. Family shouldn't play favourites. Family shouldn't exploit each other. Family shouldn't sign contracts without reading them. I'll never speak to you again, Mum declared, her voice ice cold. Mum, I smiled sadly. That might be the first gift you've ever given me. Later that night, my phone exploded with messages from extended family. Apparently, Mum had been busy. Aunt Sarah. How could you do this to your own parents? Uncle Bob. Your mother is heartbroken. Cousin Rachel. They gave you everything. I forwarded them all to a folder labelled Flying Monkeys and poured myself a glass of wine. On my laptop, I pulled up the property records for 742 Oak Street. The place where Dad had always said he'd retire. The investment he'd chosen over my college fund because Tessa needed the modelling money more. My phone buzzed. A text from Uriel. You okay? Better than okay, I replied. Just watching karma do its thing. Tessa went live on Instagram again that night. Sometimes the universe tests us, she sniffled to her dwindling audience. But I'm choosing to see this as an opportunity for growth. Blessed new beginnings. The comments were brutal. Girl, you lost your parents' property over Instagram. This is why you don't trust influencer coaches. Time to get a real job. I closed the app and walked to my window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, my family was probably huddled around their dining table, desperately trying to find a way out of the trap they'd set for themselves. But for the first time in my life, their crisis wasn't my problem. Their poor planning wasn't my emergency. Their dreams weren't my responsibility. My phone buzzed one last time. A final text from Dad. I hope you're happy. I typed back, I am. And that's what really bothers you, isn't it? Then I turned off my phone and went to bed, sleeping better than I had in years. I stared at Mum, sobbing on the front porch. For the first time in my life, I felt nothing. The for sale sign went up on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, Mum had staged a one-woman protest on the front steps of the rental property, mascara-stained tissues littering the ground around her designer heels. "She's been there for 3 hours," my old neighbour Tommy texted, along with a photo. "Your dad keeps trying to get her to leave." I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the messages to Evelyn, who called immediately. "Have you seen Tessa's latest video?" she asked without preamble. "No, but I'm sure it's riveting." "She started a GoFundMe. Save our family legacy, complete with crying emoji and everything." I pulled up the page. Tessa's tear-streaked face filled the screen as she told her version of events. How her jealous sister had tricked the family. How their precious property was being stolen. How she just needed a little help from her amazing followers. Current donations, $43. "At least she's finally learning about real income," I muttered. "Your mom's making the rounds too," Evelyn continued. "She called my mother yesterday, trying to get your work friends to pressure you into doing the right thing." "The right thing?" I laughed. "Like what they did when they—" My doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Dad, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "I'll call you back," I told Evelyn. I opened the door but blocked the entrance. "Yes? Can we talk?" He held up a manila envelope. "I brought the original loan papers. Maybe if we go through them together?" "There's nothing to go through. The terms are clear." "Your mother's not well," he tried. "The stress is—" "The stress she caused herself?" I crossed my arms. "The stress of finally facing consequences. We're your parents." "Really? Because for the past 28 years, you've only been Tessa's parents. I was just the backup plan, the responsible one, the boring one. That's not fair." "Neither was making me work through a high school while Tessa got dance lessons. Neither was refinancing your house for her fashion line while I took out student loans. Neither was guilt-tripping me into co-signing a loan you knew would default." He slumped against the doorframe. "We never meant—" "You never meant for it to blow up in your faces," I finished. "You never meant for your actions to have consequences. You never meant for me to stop being your safety net." "Please," he whispered, "we can't lose the property." "You already have." I closed the door on his protest and checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Mum, 2 from Tessa, and a string of texts from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Then a new notification. Tessa had tagged me in her latest Instagram story. I clicked, despite my better judgment. "This is what toxic family looks like," she sobbed to the camera. "My own sister, who I trusted, who I loved, betrayed us all. But you know what? I'm choosing forgiveness. I'm choosing to rise above. And I'm asking my amazing followers to help save our family property." The comments were a battlefield. "Girl, you spent $60K on Instagram photos and lost your parents' property? This is the best karma story ever. Maybe try getting an actual job." My phone buzzed with a text from Uriel. "Bank's moving forward with the property claim. You sure you want to see this through?" "Absolutely," I replied. I walked to my kitchen window, which overlooked the city. Somewhere out there, Mum was probably still sitting on those front steps, playing the victim for anyone who would listen. Dad was probably making desperate calls to lawyers who would tell him exactly what he didn't want to hear. And Tessa was undoubtedly planning her next tearful video, trying to milk the last drops of sympathy from her dwindling audience. My phone lit up again, a message from an unknown number. "You heartless bitch. How could you do this to your own family? Aunt Linda." I added it to my blocked list and poured myself a coffee. The morning news played quietly in the background as I prepared for work, just another normal day at the office. Because that's the thing about revenge. It doesn't always come with dramatic confrontations or satisfying showdowns. Sometimes It's just watching quietly as people who never thought they'd face consequences finally run out of chances. I grabbed my keys and headed out, passing my building's bulletin board. Someone had posted a notice about a financial literacy workshop at the local community centre. I paused, took a photo of the contact information. Maybe, when this was all over, I'd volunteer there. Help other people learn to protect themselves from the Tessas of the world. After all, I was pretty good at reading the fine print. I didn't ruin them. They did this to themselves. I just stopped carrying their sins. The auction was held on a crisp autumn morning in the bank's main conference room. I sat in the back, wearing sunglasses and a blazer I'd never worn before. Nobody from my family noticed me. They were too busy huddled in the front row, Mum clutching Dad's arm, Tessa filming everything for her documentary about family betrayal. Lot 247, the auctioneer announced. Property at 742 Oak Street. Starting bid at $300,000. Mum's shoulders stiffened. This was the property she'd bragged about at every dinner party. The investment she'd chosen over my education. Their retirement safety net. 320, called a voice from the middle row. 340, counted another. I watched my father's hand twitch, probably imagining the paddle in his grip, the bids he couldn't make. Their lawyer had already explained. They couldn't participate without proof of funds, which they didn't have. 360, called a familiar voice. I looked up. Mrs. Rodriguez, our old neighbour from when I was a kid, the one Mum always looked down on because she cleaned houses for a living, the one who'd secretly slipped me lunch money during high school when my parents were too busy funding Tessa's modelling portfolio to notice I was skipping meals. 365, someone else tried. 390, Mrs. Rodriguez counted firmly. Mum turned around, face paling as she recognised her former neighbour. The woman she'd once told, "Some people are just meant to be renters." Going once at 390, Tessa's phone kept recording, her mascara starting to run. Going twice. Dad stared straight ahead, shoulders slumped. Sold to bidder number 43. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled, her decades of hard work and careful saving finally paying off. She told me once while I was mowing her lawn for extra cash. Sometimes the best revenge is just succeeding. I slipped out before the paperwork started, but not before hearing Mum's shrill voice. "This is a mistake. That property has been in our family for—" "Mum," the auctioneer cut in, "the sale is final." Outside, the autumn air felt clean, new. My phone buzzed with a notification. Tessa had already posted. "The most heartbreaking day of my life. Watch my family legacy being stolen by the system. Link in bio for my full story and support fund." The comments rolled in immediately. "Girl, this is getting pathetic." "Maybe if you hadn't blown 60K on Instagram." "Time to get a real job." Then a text from Evelyn. "It's done?" "It's done," I replied. "How do you feel?" I thought about it. The property was gone. The family's safety net had vanished. Their carefully constructed image of success had crumbled. "I feel light," I typed back. Another notification popped up. A direct message from Mrs. Rodriguez. "Thank you for the tip about the auction. The tenants can stay as long as they want, same rent. Some people understand the value of stability." I smiled, remembering how she'd taught me to budget when I was 16, showing me her careful ledgers while Mum was driving Tessa to yet another modelling shoot. My phone rang. Dad's number. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message. "Olivia, we never meant... Your mother's devastated. Tessa's talking about moving back home. Everything's falling apart. I hope you're happy with what you've done." I saved the message, a reminder of why I'd done this. Not for revenge, not really, but for justice. For the teenage girl who'd worked overtime while her sister got everything. For the college student who'd eaten ramen while her parents refinanced their house for Tessa's dreams. Walking to my car, I passed a coffee shop window. Inside, a young barista was carefully counting her tips. Something clicked. I pulled out my phone and called the number from that financial literacy workshop flyer. "Hi," I said when someone answered. "I'm interested in volunteering. I have some experience with financial planning and, let's say, family dynamics." "Perfect," the coordinator replied. "We're actually starting a new program for young women next month, teaching them about budgeting, loans, protecting their assets." Sounds exactly like what I'm looking for. That evening, I drove past 742 Oak Street one last time. The "for sale" sign was gone, replaced by Mrs. Rodriguez's "under new management" notice. In the window, I could see one of the long-term tenants watering her plants, secure in the knowledge her rent wouldn't suddenly spike. My phone buzzed again. Mom's number this time. I declined the call and turned on my favourite playlist instead. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else's world. It's about finally building your own, free from their chaos, their demands, their endless taking. I drove home to my quiet apartment, to my stable job, to my carefully built life. All the boring, responsible things they'd mocked. Turns out boring wasn't so bad after all. Sometimes you don't torch the bridge. You just stop patching the holes and let them fall through. And when they do, you realise the weight holding you down wasn't duty. It was them. Welcome to financial self-defence? I smiled at the dozen young women gathered in the community centre's meeting room. I'm Olivia, and I'm here to teach you what nobody taught me, how to protect yourself from financial abuse. A hand shot up immediately. Like, from scammers? Sometimes, I nodded. But often it's from people closer to home. Family, friends, partners who claim to love you. Another participant leaned forward. "Is this about that viral influencer story? The one where the sister lost her parents' property?" I kept my face neutral. "Actually, that's a perfect example. Let's talk about co-signing loans." After class, while packing up my materials, I noticed one student lingering. She twisted her hands nervously before approaching. "My sister keeps asking me to invest in her business ventures," she blurted out. "Mum says I'm being selfish for saying no." "Let me guess," I said gently. "Your sister's the family favourite?" Her eyes widened. "How did you know?" "Because some patterns are universal." I handed her my card. "Call me if you need help drafting boundaries." Outside, the autumn evening was cooling into winter. My phone showed 3 missed calls, all from unknown numbers. My family's latest tactic was using their friends' phones to try reaching me. I deleted the notifications and opened an email from Mrs. Rodriguez instead. "Thought you'd want to know. Your parents tried to rent an apartment in my other building. I declined their application. Some lessons need to stick." A text from Evelyn popped up. "Have you seen Tessa's latest post?" I checked Instagram reluctantly. Tessa's new profile photo showed her in business casual wear, her bio changed to social media marketing specialist. Her latest post read, "Sometimes rock bottom is where you find your foundation. Just personal growth, just at starting over." The comments were surprisingly supportive. "Love this realistic content. Props for getting a real job. Character development we love to see." My phone rang, Uriel's number this time. I answered. "Your mother's lawyer reached out again," he said without preamble. "They want to discuss a family reconciliation." Still no. "They're offering to repay the loan amount." "With what money?" Apparently Tessa's new job. The answer's still no. I watched a family walking past my car, parents holding their children's hands equally. "Some debts can't be repaid with money." "You sure? They seem desperate to regain control," I corrected. "To rewrite the narrative. To make me the villain who can be redeemed through their forgiveness." Fair point. I drove home, thinking about patterns and cycles and how hard it is to break them. about how sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let people face their own consequences. At my apartment, a package waited by my door. Inside was a handwritten letter from Mrs. Rodriguez and an old photo. Teenage me mowing her lawn, looking tired but proud. Dear Olivia, remember this day? You told me you were saving for college while your sister was at modelling camp. I knew then you'd succeed, not because you were gifted, but because you understood value. Real value, not the kind your family chased. The property is doing well. The tenants send their thanks for the stable rent. Sometimes the best revenge is just living right. Carmen Rodriguez P.S. I heard about your financial literacy classes. Proud of you, girl. I pinned the photo to my bulletin board, right next to the flyer for next week's workshop. Financial boundaries, protecting yourself without guilt. My phone lit up with a final text for the day from that nervous student. I did it. I told my sister no. Mum's furious, but I feel free. That feeling, I typed back. That's your self-respect growing stronger. Keep feeding it. I made dinner in my quiet kitchen, enjoying the peace. No family drama demanding my attention. No sister's crisis to solve. No parents' expectations to meet. On my fridge, held by a magnet, was a quote I'd found during those dark days before the loan default. Sometimes the happy ending isn't getting what you wanted. It's realizing what you deserved all along. My phone buzzed one last time. A comment notification on Tessa's latest post. Someone had written, "Wonder whatever happened to your sister?" Tessa's reply, "She taught me the hardest lesson of my life. Hope someday she knows I learned it." I closed the app without responding. Some bridges don't need to be burned or rebuilt. They just need to stay broken, reminding us why we crossed them in the first place. Besides, I had lesson plans to write. Tomorrow's topic: how to recognize when love becomes a weapon. I had a feeling the class would be full.
I never asked to be born, but my parents, Wayne and Abigail Billy, made it painfully clear from the start that I wasn't planned. I'm Madison, the second child they didn't want. My older sister, Amber, was the golden child, the one they dreamed of. Growing up in the Billy house was like living in two separate worlds. Amber's world was full of love, attention, and celebration. Mine, a cold, shadowy place filled with indifference and barely concealed resentment. I still remember my 8th birthday as if it happened yesterday. I woke up hopeful, daring to believe this year might be different. Maybe this time they'd remember, maybe they'd care, but when I came downstairs, my parents were seated at the kitchen table, engrossed in a conversation about Amber's upcoming dance recital. "Morning," I said, trying to keep the hope from my voice. Mom looked up briefly, her expression blank. "Oh, Madison, your cereal's in the cupboard." That was it. No happy birthday, no hug, nothing. Later that evening, at dinner, Dad finally remembered. "Oh, right. Happy birthday, kid," he muttered, not even bothering to look up from his plate. Mom blinked in surprise. "Is that today? I thought it was next week." That night, I lay in bed clutching the only birthday card I received, a small note from Grandma Francesca. Her words were like a lifeline. "My dearest Madison, happy birthday, sweetheart. You bring so much joy to my life. Never forget how special and loved you are. Love always, Grandma." I read the card over and over, desperately trying to believe her words. But how could I feel special when my own parents barely acknowledged my existence? School wasn't much better. Parent-teacher conferences were an endless cycle of disappointment. Other kids' parents showed up, proud and supportive. Mine always had an excuse. "Sorry, Madison," Mom would say, her voice devoid of remorse. "Amber has a dance competition that day. You understand, right?" I'd nod, pretending it didn't hurt, but it always did. The worst moments came late at night when they thought I couldn't hear. Their voices would drift up the stairs, sharp and cruel. "I just don't get it," Dad said one evening. "Amber's so bright and talented. Why can't Madison be more like her?" Mom sighed heavily. "I know. It's like she doesn't even try. Remember how Amber was reading at 4? Madison could barely tie her shoes at that age. Their words carved deep scars into me, each one a reminder that I'd never be good enough. I became quiet and withdrawn, retreating into myself because, really, what was the point of trying? The only person who truly saw me was Grandma Francesca. Every visit to her cozy little house felt like stepping into a different world, a world where I was loved and heard, a world where I could just be. When I was 13, I hit my breaking point. Home had become unbearable, and I knew I couldn't stay. One day, tears streaming down my face, I went to Grandma. "Grandma," I whispered, my voice trembling, can I live with you?" Her answer was immediate, her embrace warm and unwavering. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, pulling me close, "you'll always have a home with me, and one day, everything I have will be yours." I melted into her arms, feeling safe for the first time in years. I didn't care about inheriting anything, I just wanted to feel loved. When my parents found out, their reactions were predictably indifferent. "That tiny house?" Dad scoffed. "She works at a library for peanuts. What could she possibly offer you?" Mom just shrugged, relief evident in her voice. "Well, if that's what you want, it'll make things easier for us." Their apathy stung, but it also reassured me that I was making the right choice. They didn't value Grandma's love, but I did. Living with Grandma wasn't easy, money was tight, and we often struggled to make ends meet, but none of that mattered. For the first time, I felt cherished. Grandma attended every school event, always sitting in the front row, cheering me on. My drawings covered her fridge, and she'd proudly tell everyone about her brilliant granddaughter. Under her care, I began to thrive. The shy, quiet girl I had been slowly disappeared. I made friends, joined clubs, and my grades improved. Love and support had transformed me. Everything seemed to be falling into place, until one crisp autumn afternoon when Grandma came home looking unusually emotional. Her smile was there, but her eyes brimmed with tears. "Madison, sweetheart," she said, her voice trembling, "we need to talk. It's about my sister, Marilyn. She passed away." I barely remembered Aunt Marilyn, a wealthy and distant businesswoman. "I'm so sorry, Grandma," I said, taking her hand. She squeezed it tightly. "There's more, Madison. Marilyn, she left me everything, her entire fortune. We're millionaires now, sweetheart, multimillionaires." The news spread quickly. It didn't take long for my parents to reappear, knocking on our door one evening. When Grandma opened it, there they stood, Wayne and Abigail Billy, their eyes shiny with tears. "Francesca, Madison," Mom said, her voice trembling in a way I'd never heard before, "we've made a terrible mistake." Dad nodded, looking unusually humble. "We've been awful parents, truly awful, but we've realized how wrong we were, and we want to make things right." I stood frozen. The same people who had ignored me for years were now pleading for a second chance. "Please, Madison," Mom said, her voice trembling as she reached out to me, "come home. Let us be the family we should have been all along." I turned to Grandma, my heart heavy with uncertainty. She gave me a kind, reassuring smile. "It's your decision, sweetheart," she said softly. "Whatever you choose, I'll support you." After days of agonizing over it, I decided to give them another chance. With Grandma's blessing, I packed my things and returned to the Billy house. At first, it felt like a dream come true. Mom and Dad were attentive and loving, coming to every school event and cheering me on. They gave me thoughtful gifts, not expensive, but ones that showed they were paying attention to what I liked. We even started having family game nights. I'll never forget the first time Dad ruffled my hair after I won at Monopoly, saying, "That's my girl." The warmth that spread through me was indescribable. The biggest surprise was bedtime. Mom began tucking me in every night, something I'd always dreamed of as a little girl. She'd smooth my hair and kiss my forehead. "Good night, sweetheart," she'd whisper. "We love you so much." Even Amber seemed different. She included me in her plans, introduced me to her friends, and gave me advice about boys and makeup. I wanted so badly to believe it was real, that my family had truly changed and finally saw me for who I was. But a tiny voice in the back of my mind whispered doubts. Why now? Why only after Grandma came into money? I pushed those thoughts aside, determined to enjoy the loving family life I'd always dreamed of. I called Grandma often, excitedly sharing how happy I was. She always sounded glad for me, but there was a hint of caution in her voice. "Just remember, Madison," she'd say gently, "you always have a home with me, no matter what." Life settled into a new routine. Amber, always the golden child, graduated high school with honors and went off to a prestigious college. Grandma moved into a beautiful new house, finally retiring from her job at the library. And me? I was thriving, doing well in school, with close friends, and even dating Caleb, a boy from my chemistry class. One Thursday evening, I had a date with Caleb at the local diner. I spent hours getting ready, changing outfits and redoing my makeup, feeling nervous but excited. But as I sat waiting at the diner, my phone buzzed. Sorry, Madison, something came up, can't make it tonight. Disappointment sank in, and I left the diner early, heading home. The house was quiet when I arrived, so I used my key to avoid waking anyone. As I walked past Dad's study, I heard voices. I was about to announce my return when Mom's voice stopped me cold. I don't know how much longer I can keep up this act, she said, her tone sharp with frustration. I never wanted her in the first place, and pretending to love her is exhausting. I froze, my heart hammering. Pretending to love me? Dad's response turned my stomach. We just have to be patient. Once Mom passes, all the money will go to Madison. If we play our cards right, we can convince her to share it with us. Just think of the life we could have. Their words shattered me. Every moment of love and acceptance had been a lie, a calculated performance for Grandma's fortune. Tears welled up as the truth sunk in, crushing the fragile hope I'd been clinging to. I took out my phone and hit record, unable to stop myself from capturing their betrayal. When I couldn't bear to listen any longer, I walked back to the front door, took a deep breath, and slammed it loudly. I'm home, I called out, forcing my voice to sound steady. Mom and Dad appeared almost instantly, their faces plastered with smiles and fake concern. Madison, sweetie, you're back early, Mom said, her brow furrowed in what I now recognized as insincere worry. Everything okay? Yeah, I muttered. Caleb canceled. Something came up. Their reactions were perfect, too perfect. Mom clicked her tongue sympathetically, and Dad gave me a reassuring pat on the shoulder. I had to fight the urge to recoil from his touch. That night, I lay awake for hours, their cruel words replaying in my mind. By morning, I had made my decision. After they left the house, I packed a duffel bag with my clothes and a few meaningful keepsakes. Without looking back, I left the Billy house and went straight to Grandma's. When she opened the door and saw me standing there with my bag, her eyes widened. Madison, what's wrong, sweetheart? I couldn't hold it in any longer. Tears poured down my face as I pulled out my phone and played the recording. As Grandma listened, her expression shifted, shock, disbelief, and finally, a deep, simmering anger. Those conniving, heartless, she stopped herself, taking a deep breath before looking at me with soft, loving eyes. Don't you worry, honey, we'll give them a surprise they'll never forget. She pulled me into a tight hug, and for the first time since hearing that awful conversation, I felt safe. That evening, my phone buzzed incessantly, calls and messages from Mom, Dad, and even Amber. At first, I ignored them, but eventually, I answered. Hello, I said, my voice cold. Madison, Mom's frantic voice came through. Where are you? We've been so worried. I almost laughed at the irony. I'm with Grandma, I replied calmly, and we'd like to invite you all over tomorrow for a family conversation. There was a long silence before Mom stammered. Of course, we'll be there, Madison. Honey, whatever's wrong, we'll fix it. I hung up before she could continue. Fix it? They had no idea what was coming. The next evening, the air was heavy with tension as the doorbell rang. Grandma gave my hand a reassuring squeeze before answering. Wayne and Abigail Billy stepped inside, their faces full of fake concern and affection. Madison, sweetheart, Mom began, reaching out to me. I stepped back, watching confusion flicker across her face. Grandma's voice was calm but firm. Please, have a seat. We have a lot to discuss. As they sat down, Dad's eyes darted around, taking in the signs of wealth. Mom, what's this about? Is everything okay? Without a word, I placed my phone on the table and pressed play. Their voices filled the room, cold, calculating, and damning. The effect was immediate. The color drained from their faces as they sat, wide-eyed and speechless. When the recording ended, the silence was deafening. Then they both began speaking at once, their voices a jumble of excuses and apologies. Grandma raised her hand, silencing them. When she spoke, her voice trembled with disappointment and barely controlled anger. I hoped, truly believed, that you had changed, she said, her words deliberate and heavy. The realization was a tidal wave, washing over my parents as Grandma delivered her verdict. I had considered dividing my estate among all of you, she said, her voice unwavering, but now I see clearly, everything I have will go to Madison, alone. Their faces fell, struck by the full weight of her words. Panic flickered in their eyes as the reality of their failed scheme set in. It wasn't just the money they'd lost, but also any chance of being part of a family grounded in love and trust. "Please, you have to understand," Mom's voice cracked, tears streaming down her face. "We made mistakes, but we love Madison. We can fix this." She reached out, desperation etched into every word. When begging failed to soften Grandma's resolve, their tone turned venomous. Dad's face twisted with fury. "You can't do this. We're her parents, we have rights. We'll make sure you never see her again, Francesca." Their threats didn't faze me. For the first time, I felt a calm certainty about what I needed to do. "I'm filing for emancipation," I said, my voice steady. "Grandma will be my legal guardian. You won't have any control over me anymore." The shock on their faces would have been almost comical if it weren't so tragic. They looked between me and Grandma, realization dawning that their carefully laid plans had not just crumbled, they had completely backfired. "I think it's time for you to leave," Grandma said firmly, her tone brooking no argument. She stood and gestured toward the door. After a moment of hesitation, they left, their defeat palpable. When the door closed behind them, I released a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Grandma enveloped me in a warm hug, and for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of peace. The weeks following the confrontation were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Grandma hired the best lawyers to help secure my emancipation and transfer guardianship to her. I had naively believed my parents would step aside once their deceit was exposed. I was wrong. Wayne and Abigail fought bitterly to retain control, clinging to the hope of accessing Grandma's wealth. But the evidence against them was overwhelming. Years of neglect and emotional abuse became the foundation of our case. Teachers from my schools testified about their absence, how they never came to parent-teacher conferences or attended my school events. My third-grade teacher, Mrs. Randy, recounted the time I won the spelling bee, and no one from my family showed up to celebrate. Even neighbors came forward, painting a stark contrast between the extravagant parties my sister Amber enjoyed and my overlooked birthdays. The final hearing came quickly. To my surprise, Amber walked into the courtroom, slipping quietly into the back. When she took the stand, her testimony dismantled the last remnants of my parents' defense. "Yes, Your Honor," Amber said, her voice calm and deliberate. "I knew about my parents' plan to use Madison to gain access to Grandma's money. The sudden kindness, the sisterly bonding, it was all part of the act." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. I sat frozen, struggling to process her words. She met my gaze briefly, and for a moment, I thought I saw regret in her eyes. But it was too late. Her admission was the final blow, severing any hope of reconciliation. The judge's decision was swift and unequivocal. Grandma was granted full guardianship, and I was emancipated from Wayne and Abigail Billy. As we left the courthouse, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in my life, I was free. The mansion I now called home became more than just a physical refuge, it was a sanctuary where I could heal and rebuild. Grandma's love was a constant, her encouragement a beacon as I navigated my new life. I poured myself into my studies, no longer burdened by the need to prove my worth to indifferent parents. For the first time, I was living for myself. Grandma supported me in every way she could, offering opportunities one had only dreamed of. But it was her unwavering belief in me that truly changed my life. "You can be anything you want to be, Madison," she'd say, her eyes sparkling with pride. "The world is yours." Together, we traveled the globe. In England, I fell in love with art and architecture. On a safari in Africa, I discovered a passion for wildlife photography. Each experience unearthed new facets of myself, helping me grow into the person I was always meant to be. But the most transformative work happened in the quiet office of Dr. Lucas, my therapist. Twice a week, I unpacked years of pain and learned to navigate my emotions. "It's okay to be angry," she told me once. "It's okay to grieve the family you should have had." Slowly, I began to trust again, not just others, but myself. The night before my high school graduation, Grandma and I sat on the patio, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. She reached over and took my hand, her expression tender. "I'm so proud of you, Madison. You've been through so much, and look at you now, you're stronger and more beautiful than ever." Tears welled in my eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. I couldn't have done it without you, Grandma. You saved me. She shook her head with a gentle smile. No, sweetheart. You saved yourself. I just gave you the space to do it. The next day, as I stood on the stage accepting my diploma, I heard Grandma's cheers above everyone else's. A wave of peace washed over me. My past no longer defined me. Instead, it had forged me into someone stronger, ready to embrace the future. Looking out at the crowd, my eyes met Grandma's. In that moment, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I wouldn't face them alone. I've come to a harsh realization: Owen lacks responsibility and compassion. It's clear now that I have to take decisive action. I've decided to stay in this house with my parents, and Owen will need to leave. Since we got married, Owen has depended on me for everything. Despite my efforts, and the $4,000 I pay in monthly rent, he's now trying to force me out of my own home. This is my breaking point. 4 months. I've contemplated divorce, but Owen's selfishness and dismissive remarks have solidified my decision. I told him firmly, I will leave this house. Yes, but for now, you need to go. His response? A shrug and a flippant, fine, I'll be out tonight and back tomorrow. Just make sure you're gone by then. The nerve of him. Don't you even care to check what I might take with me? I asked. He replied without hesitation, don't touch my equipment. Do whatever you want with the rest of the stuff. His dismissive attitude left me stunned but also resolute. If he's giving me free rein to manage the household items, I might as well use the opportunity wisely. Perhaps it's time Owen faces the consequences of his choices. I've already started planning. If necessary, I'll hire a removal service to pack up everything I care about. Owen might finally learn what it's like to deal with the aftermath of his actions. Let me give you some context. I'm Erica, 31 years old, a graduate of a prestigious program, and a researcher at a well-known company. My career is stable, and I earn enough to afford a $4,000 a month apartment. On paper, my life seems ideal: a good job, a nice home, and a family. I have a husband, Owen, and a son, Sam. From the outside, it might look like I have it all. But appearances can be deceiving. That $4,000 rent is a significant strain on our budget, even with my decent salary. The real issue, however, is Owen's refusal to contribute meaningfully. At 32, he's still chasing a dream of becoming a musician. I once admired his ambition. In his early days, he performed at events and small venues, and his passion was inspiring. But that was years ago. The income he makes from part-time jobs is erratic, and his dream of making it big feels more like an illusion. Meanwhile, I've been left to shoulder all the responsibility. When I voice my concerns about the financial burden, Owen dismisses them. You sound like an old woman. He scoffs. I'm not complaining, I'm stating facts. I've been patient, supportive, and understanding, but my patience has run out. I've carried this marriage and this family long enough. Owen's refusal to change has forced me to make a choice. Divorce is no longer just an idea, it's the solution. I deserve a life where I'm not constantly worrying about rent or being belittled for speaking the truth. Sam and I deserve better. It's time to prioritize my well-being and let go of a relationship that only holds me back. When I was younger, I saw Owen's potential. He seemed full of promise, and I believed in his dreams. When I got pregnant, he promised to work hard for our future. I was 20 when we got married, and I thought he would let go of his music career to focus on building a life with us. At first, I felt guilty for questioning his choices. I didn't want him to feel like he had to abandon his dreams entirely. But after Sam was born, nothing changed. Owen kept chasing his music dreams, working part-time jobs, and acting as if he had no other obligations. I couldn't take it anymore. One day, I confronted him. How long do you plan to keep working part-time? You're almost 32. People your age are building careers. I have my own way of living, he replied, dismissively. Don't compare me to others. His words infuriated me. Your way of living doesn't mean anything if you're not contributing. Start helping with household expenses. When I become famous, he shot back, I'll make up for the money I'm not earning now. Stop dreaming and face reality. I snapped. He had no answer. Eventually, he picked up another part-time job, but it wasn't enough. Despite everything, he kept talking about his dreams. You're being too noisy, he'd say. Times have changed. There are so many ways to succeed without signing with an agency. I'm making progress, even if it's slow. It's exhausting. His band broke up years ago, And the other members moved on, some got married, others found steady jobs. Owen clings to the past. He calls giving up on dreams pathetic, but I see it differently. Sacrificing a dream to support your family is meaningful and responsible. Is that so wrong? When I was pregnant, Owen promised to work hard for our child. What he really meant was he'd keep working hard at his music career. I kept hoping he'd change, but now I see it's not going to happen. Did you buy expensive clothes again? I asked recently, frustrated. Looking good is important for my job, he replied. His job? His dream? His excuses? They're not enough anymore. It's time for me to move on. I'm ready to rebuild a life of stability and happiness for myself and my son, without Owen holding us back. I couldn't believe it. Owen hasn't made a single dollar from his music career, yet he talks as if he's already a star. It's been 11 years since our son, Sam, was born, and Owen is still working part-time jobs. At nearly 32, he's spent years chasing dreams that have yielded no tangible success. Instead of contributing to the household, he spends money on expensive clothes and music equipment. I wish you'd spend less on those things and help with the household expenses, I told him. You can't satisfy hunger with pretense. These things are necessary for me, he snapped back. His attitude fuels our arguments. We try to discuss these issues privately, away from Sam, but in a small apartment. It's impossible to keep our voices from carrying. Sam often overhears, and that's one reason we've considered moving to a bigger place. As our son grows, the apartment only feels more cramped. Sam's 11 now, and this place is too small. I told Owen, should we move? Yeah, he said nonchalantly. This was your house originally anyway, right? You lived here alone before we got married. Do you have a problem with that? I asked. It's not a problem, he replied, but I'd like to move to a bigger place, maybe a high-rise condo. That would be cool. And who's going to pay for it? I pressed. I'll help with the household expenses, he said, as if it were a great concession. You handle the rent, and I'll cover electricity, gas, and groceries. Please, I really want to live in a high-rise condo. With my salary, it was possible to afford the rent, and his offer to help, even in a small way, gave me a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the push he needed to start valuing money and taking responsibility. Okay, I agreed. I'll look for a place, but since I'm paying the rent, I get to choose where we live. Deal? Deal, he said eagerly. As long as it's a high-rise condo, I'm fine with whatever you pick. I hoped this move would mark a fresh start for our family, but things didn't go as planned. A year after moving into the condo, Owen is still chasing his music dreams, still making excuses, and still breaking promises. Hey, the gas bill came, I reminded him one day. Make sure you pay it before it's debited from my account. I'll give it to you next time, he said casually. When is next time? You always say that, but you never pay, I said, frustration boiling over. Do you think money isn't important? I'm asking for the bare minimum to cover our bills. Why do I have to keep scolding you about this? All you ever do is fuss about money, he snapped. His dismissiveness left me fuming. Owen promised to help with the bills, but it's clear his promises were empty. Thankfully, I set up direct payments for utilities to avoid overdue charges. Otherwise, Owen would likely neglect them entirely. Occasionally, he leaves small amounts of money behind, like the $100 bill I once found on the living room table. For a moment, I thought maybe he was embarrassed to hand it to me directly. Perhaps it was his way of showing he cared, but then I realized I was wrong. He hadn't paid his share of the electricity bill that month either. I do pay sometimes, don't I? Owen argued when I confronted him. It felt like he only handed over small amounts to soothe his conscience. Then there were the lies. One day, he asked me, I want to take my parents on a trip. Can you lend me some money? How much do you need? I asked. $100 should be enough, he replied. I gave him the money, but deep down, I knew it wasn't for a trip. Owen has a habit of lying when he wants pocket money. He likely used it to treat his friends or buy something frivolous. Meanwhile, I'm left paying $4,000 a month for rent. I thought moving into this condo might inspire Owen to take work more seriously, but he continues to let me down. I can't save for the future under these conditions. I'd rather use the money for something meaningful, like Sam's education or our retirement. I've considered divorce before, but now it's becoming a serious option. Then Owen said something that made my decision crystal clear. Hey, we have an unused room, right? I was thinking of clearing it out and making it a space for my parents, he said. A room for your parents? Are you saying they'd move in with us? I asked, surprised. My parents are getting older. We can't just leave him alone, he said, trying to sound noble. I know Owen well enough to see through him. He talks big but rarely follows through. Who does he think pays the $4,000 rent? I also cover all living expenses and our son's education. The idea of taking on the responsibility of his parents as well was unacceptable. I'm against it, I replied firmly. Don't answer so quickly, think about it for a while, he urged. I have thought about it, and my answer is no, I said again. Why are you being so stubborn? What's wrong with taking care of my parents? Are you telling me to abandon them? You're heartless, he snapped. To an outsider, I might sound selfish, but the problem isn't his parents, it's Owen. If they moved in, I know I'd be the one taking care of them, just as I handle everything else in this household. I will not live with your parents, I said resolutely. Owen glared at me. Fine, I'll live here with them. You need to leave. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Since we got married, Owen has been entirely dependent on me, and now he's trying to kick me out of the house I pay for. His selfishness and irresponsibility made my decision clear. Fine, I said coldly, I'll leave. Good, pack your things and get out quickly. I'll be back tomorrow evening, make sure you're gone by then. Are you sure you don't want to check what I might take with me? I asked. Don't touch my equipment, do whatever you want with the rest, he said before storming out. With Owen gone, a strange sense of freedom washed over me. As I stood there, my 15-year-old son, Sam, stepped out of his room. Mom, I'll help you pack. I'll go with you too, he said softly, trying to comfort me. His words broke my heart. Whenever Owen and I fought, Sam would quietly retreat to avoid the tension. As a parent, it crushed me to see my child feel like he had to tiptoe around us. Where should we start, Mom? He asked. Start with your own things, I said. I have something else to handle. I couldn't help but smile bitterly. Owen was about to get a little shock of his own. As I grabbed my phone and made a call, I prepared for the next step in our escape. Hello, I'm sorry for the last-minute request, but could you help us tomorrow? I asked. Once everything essential was packed, my son and I left for a business hotel to figure out our next move. It wasn't ideal, but it felt like the first step toward reclaiming our lives. That evening, as expected, Owen called. I placed my phone on the table, exchanged a glance with Sam, and answered. What's going on? Where are you? Owen's voice was loud and agitated. What do you mean? Is there a problem? I asked calmly. All my clothes and equipment are here, but everything else is gone. Where's the table? The fridge? Did you take them? His panic was palpable. No, I replied. I called a junk removal service. By now, it's probably all been burned. Sam, sitting nearby, chimed in. Owen fell silent for a moment, likely shocked to realize Sam was still with me. What do you mean, burned? He finally sputtered. The furniture and appliances are marital property. You told me I could do whatever I wanted with everything except your equipment, so I did, I said. How am I supposed to live now? He yelled. If you need furniture, buy new ones. In the meantime, use your amp as a chair or wrap your guitar in a towel for a pillow, I replied, unable to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. That's not funny, how could you do something so nasty? He snapped. We're getting a divorce, I said firmly. Yes, I understand, he replied, trying to sound unaffected. I knew he thought this was just another argument, but I had made up my mind. His response only strengthened my resolve. Good, I said, we'll talk about the details later. Since you're planning to live in the house with your parents, I'll go to the real estate agent tomorrow to update the contract. Owen hesitated. If you change the contract to my name, the divorce will be final. Are you sure about this? He asked, his voice trembling. Yes, I said coldly, making it clear there was no turning back. His pride wouldn't let him backtrack, even though I could tell he regretted how far things had gone. A few days later, we went to the real estate office to finalize the condo arrangements. I ended my part of the contract with ease, but Owen hit a wall when he tried to transfer it to his name. What? The rent is $4,500? His face went pale. He had no idea how expensive it was, because he'd never asked. He assumed he could rely on his parents to help cover the cost, but their retirement income made that impossible. You've been paying this much every month? He asked in disbelief. Yes, I replied, and I've been covering everything else too, because you never contributed. I can't afford this, he admitted. Of course not, I said, you wouldn't even pass the screening. The real estate agent confirmed this, and Owen sat in stunned silence. So, what do I do now? He finally asked. If you can't sign the contract, you'll have to leave, I said matter-of-factly. Owen's face reddened, a mix of anger and humiliation. Reluctantly, he left the office, realizing he was completely out of his depth. After the divorce was finalized, Owen's life fell apart. When I informed his parents about the situation, they decided to stop supporting him until he found stable work. Unable to rely on them, Owen struggled to rent even a small apartment. His freelancing income was too unstable to sustain a music career, and at 32, his chances of finding a regular job were slim. Meanwhile, I found a new apartment for Sam and me. The rent is much more affordable, and I can finally use my income for meaningful things like our future. While I don't fault anyone for chasing their dreams, I found peace in creating a stable, happy life for my son. That's what truly matters to me now. Enough, Susan, my mom shouted, her voice quivering with frustration as she leaned forward, her glare cutting through the tension like a blade. The ornaments on the Christmas tree sparkled faintly under the dim glow of the living room lights, but the festive warmth felt cruelly hollow. I sat frozen, my hands gripping my lap, trying to quell the anger rising inside me. You always have to make everything about you, my dad added, his tone sharp enough to sting. The words hit harder than I expected, and for a moment, the only sound in the room was the faint ticking of the clock on the mantel. My name is Susan Blanchard. I was 32 years old then, and this was Christmas Eve in the late 1970s, a time when families like ours in rural Illinois depended on one another. Our family farm, passed down for generations, was struggling to stay afloat. Years earlier, I'd moved to Chicago to become a lawyer, a choice my parents still saw as a betrayal of our roots. Meanwhile, my older brother Jake stayed behind, running the farm and basking in the glow of our parents' constant praise. I didn't resent him for staying, it was how they treated me that stung. No matter what I did, I was always the outsider. Since summer, I'd quietly sent money to the farm's shared account, hoping to help with the mounting bills Jake had mentioned. He'd asked me to keep it between us, insisting it would hurt our parents' pride if they knew. At the time, it made sense. I trusted Jake to handle it, but now, sitting at the table, listening to our parents heap praise on him for sacrificing so much to save the farm, I felt a deep sense of betrayal. Jake's the reason we've been able to keep things going, my mom said, her voice thick with pride. I don't know what we'd do without him. I looked across the room at Jake, expecting some sign of acknowledgement or guilt. Instead, he leaned back in his chair with a smirk, clearly enjoying the spectacle. That was the breaking point. Actually, I said, my voice shaking but loud enough to pierce the chatter, I'm the one who's been sending money, every month since July. My dad scoffed, shaking his head as if I'd just said something absurd. Don't start making things up, Susan. Jake's been here day in and day out, working his tail off for this family. Why would you even say something like that? The dismissive tone stung more than the words. My mom crossed her arms, her expression cold. Honestly, Susan, it's Christmas. Can we not ruin the evening with your need for attention? Anger and humiliation surged through me. I'm not making it up, I said firmly. I've been depositing money at the Chicago branch of the bank directly into the farm account. Every single deposit came from me. But they weren't listening. My dad waved me off with an exasperated sigh, and my mom turned to Jake, who shrugged, feigning ignorance. The frustration was unbearable. Are you really going to sit there and lie, Jake? I demanded, my voice sharp. You know I've been making those deposits. Jake didn't flinch. He leaned back, his smirk widening. I have no idea what you're talking about, Susan, he said, his tone dripping with false innocence. My blood boiled. Unbelievable, I muttered, shaking my head, but our parents didn't seem to care. My dad sighed heavily, as if I were the one ruining the evening, while my mom cast Jake a sympathetic glance, as though he were the victim. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor, and locked eyes with Jake. You know exactly what I'm talking about, I said, my voice trembling with anger. Those deposits weren't small. You've been letting our parents believe you're some kind of hero, when all you've done is lie. If you don't admit it now, I'll leave first thing tomorrow, I said firmly, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions roiling inside. I'll go back to Chicago and get the proof myself. Jake shrugged, leaning back in his chair with infuriating nonchalance. You're wasting your time, Susan, he said with a chuckle. Whatever story you've cooked up in your head, go ahead and prove it. In that moment, I realized Jake didn't think I'd actually follow through. To him, this was just another family argument that would fizzle out, one where I'd eventually back down, letting him win like always. His smirk said it all. He thought I was too afraid of the fallout to take action. But that smirk only fueled my determination. I wasn't going to let him get away with this, not this time. He'd lied, taken advantage of me, and soaked up our parents' praise while treating my contributions like they didn't exist. I wasn't staying silent. The next morning, I packed my bags, unable to endure another moment in that house. When I told my parents I was leaving, my mom sighed, her voice heavy with disapproval. "It's Christmas, Susan," she said, as if I were the one ruining everything. My dad didn't even look up from his coffee. "Can't go a single holiday without causing a scene," he muttered. Jake, of course, barely hid his grin, lounging smugly in his chair as though he'd already won. I didn't respond. I wasn't staying, not with everyone acting like I was the problem. I knew the banks were closed, but I didn't care. I needed to get out of there, away from their judgment and his lies. The drive back to Chicago felt endless. The roads were eerily quiet, most people home celebrating with their families. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, the cold winter air seeping into the car, despite the heater working overtime. My thoughts churned, replaying the events of the night before. Jake didn't believe I'd actually do it. He probably thought I'd stew in silence, too intimidated by our parents' blind faith in him to act. But this time was different. I was done being dismissed, done letting him walk all over me. As I passed snow-covered fields and frozen lakes, one thing became certain: I would get the proof, and I would make sure everyone knew the truth. A few days later, when the banks reopened, I went straight to the Chicago branch. The morning was bitterly cold, the kind of cold that stung your skin and made every breath sharp. I stepped inside, the warmth of the bank a welcome relief, and approached the counter. "Good morning," the teller greeted me with a polite smile. "How can I help you today?" I explained, my tone firm but measured, that I needed copies of every deposit I had made to the Blanchard Farm account since July. The teller nodded and disappeared into the back. He returned with a thick ledger and a small machine that began printing receipts. One by one, the records emerged, each with my name, the dates, and the amounts clearly listed. When he handed me the stack of receipts, his smile was polite but curious. "Here you go, ma'am. Let us know if there's anything else you need." "Thank you," I said, my hands trembling slightly as I gripped the papers. They weren't just receipts, they were proof, undeniable evidence of Jake's lies. With the stack in hand, I headed back to my car. The roads were still slick from the recent snowstorm, but I didn't care. I needed to get back to the farm. The receipts sat on the passenger seat, neatly stacked and secured under a small paperweight I'd grabbed from my desk. Every time I glanced at them, my anger reignited. Jake really thought he could get away with this, and worse, that our parents had so readily taken his side. The drive back felt longer this time, the farm seeming farther away with every mile. As I passed through quiet towns and frozen landscapes, my mind raced, replaying every dismissive comment, every smug grin Jake had flashed during Christmas Eve. By the time I pulled into the long driveway leading to the farmhouse, adrenaline was coursing through me. My hands trembled as I gripped the wheel, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't leaving until they saw the truth with their own eyes. I walked into the house, the receipts clutched tightly in my hand, the cold from outside still biting at my coat. My mom was in the kitchen, stirring a pot on the stove, while my dad sat at the dining table, the newspaper held in his usual grip. Jake leaned against the counter, casually eating an apple, looking as smug as ever. They all turned to face me as I entered, but I didn't wait for any of them to speak. Instead, I strode to the table and dropped the stack of receipts in front of my dad. "There," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Every deposit I've made to the farm account since July. My name, the dates, the amounts, it's all right there." My dad frowned, setting down his newspaper as he picked up the receipts. He started flipping through them, his brows furrowing deeper with each page. My mom wandered over, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her expression a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Jake stayed where he was, but I noticed his smirk falter, just for a second. This can't be right," my dad muttered, scanning the pages again. "Why would you do this, Susan?" My mom's lips thinned as she leaned in to see for herself. "Jake said he's been covering everything," she said, her tone laced with confusion and disbelief. I turned to Jake, locking eyes with him. "Well, Jake?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Are you still going to lie about it now?" Jake chuckled, tossing the apple core into the trash with a casual flick of his wrist. Susan, he said smoothly, I don't know where you got those, but they're not real. You probably forged them to make me look bad. His calm, mocking tone churned my stomach. I glanced at our parents, expecting, hoping, for a flicker of doubt, but all I saw was their disappointment aimed squarely at me. Susan, my dad said, his voice low and angry, what's gotten into you? This is a new low, even for you. My mom grabbed the stack of receipts, holding them like they were contaminated. Did you think we wouldn't see through this? She asked, her voice shaking. Jake's been here every day, working to keep this farm alive, and you, she jabbed the receipts toward me, you come back with some phony papers and expect us to believe it? You've always been so desperate for attention. The tightness in my chest threatened to break me, but I fought to keep the tears at bay. They're not fake, I said, my voice trembling with controlled anger. You can call the bank yourself if you don't believe me. But they didn't even consider it. Instead, they stood united in their unwavering defense of Jake. My dad tossed the receipts back onto the table like they were trash. Enough, Susan, he said, his tone final. I stared at them, stunned by their refusal to even entertain the truth. I can't believe this, I said, my voice rising as the weight of their disbelief crushed me. Even with the proof right here in black and white, you still defend him? I've spent months helping keep this farm afloat, and all you've done is give Jake the credit and call me a liar. Jake crossed his arms, leaning against the counter with that infuriating smirk. Don't be so dramatic, Susan, he said with a shrug. You've always been jealous. This isn't any different. That was the last straw. You know what? I'm done, I said, my voice breaking with anger. Don't expect me to ever come back here. I've had enough. My mom's face tightened, and my dad shook his head in disappointment, as if I were the one in the wrong. Without another word, I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. The cold air hit me like a slap, but it was better than staying in that house another second. By the time I got back to Chicago, I'd made up my mind. No more bending over backward for people who refused to see the truth. The first thing I did after unpacking was call the bank. No further transfers to that account, I told the teller, my voice steady, despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. It felt strange, like cutting a cord that had tied me to the farm for so long. But it also felt freeing, like I was finally letting go of a burden I never should have carried. At first, I thought I'd feel guilty. I didn't. Every time I thought about Jake's smug face or our parents' blind defense of him, my resolve only strengthened. Let Jake handle the farm. Let him be the hero he pretended to be. I wasn't going to keep throwing money into a place that treated me like an outsider. 6 months passed in silence. Not a phone call, not a letter, nothing. I focused on my work and tried to push the anger and hurt aside. Then, one summer afternoon, there was a knock on my apartment door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I froze. Standing there were my mom and dad, looking tired and hesitant. My dad cleared his throat. Can we come in? He asked, his voice quieter than usual. My mom clutched her purse tightly, her lips pressed into a thin line. Part of me wanted to slam the door in their faces. But curiosity won out. I stepped aside and let them in. They sat awkwardly on my couch, glancing around like they didn't know where to start. What do you want? I asked finally, leaning against the armrest of a chair with my arms crossed. Whatever they had to say, I wanted it out in the open. My dad stared at the floor, his voice low and hesitant. Susan, we owe you an apology. A big one. My mom nodded, her grip on her purse so tight her knuckles were white. We were wrong, she said softly. We didn't believe you when you tried to tell us the truth. And, we need to make this right. I crossed my arms and leaned back in the chair. Go on, I said, my tone sharper than I intended. My dad let out a heavy sigh. After you left, things started falling apart on the farm, bills piled up, equipment broke down, and the crops didn't bring in enough to keep us going. At first, we thought Jake had it handled. He kept saying he'd figure it out, but he didn't, and when we pressed him, he trailed off, glancing at my mom. Her eyes were brimming with tears as she picked up where he left off. he confessed. Susan, he admitted it. You were the one making the deposits all those months. You were the reason we stayed afloat. She hesitated, her voice trembling. We couldn't believe it, not just that he lied, but that we didn't listen to you when you tried to tell us. We're sorry, Susan, truly sorry, for not believing you, for how we treated you, for everything. You didn't deserve any of it. I stared at them. For the first time, I saw something in their faces I hadn't expected, genuine shame. My dad met my gaze, his expression heavy with regret. We're asking for your forgiveness, Susan, he said quietly. I know we don't deserve it, but we had to come here and tell you the truth. You saved the farm, and we owe you more than an apology. For a moment, I let their words hang in the air. Part of me wanted to let the silence stretch on forever, to make them sit with their guilt, but instead, I asked, "Where's Jake?" My voice was calm, but anger simmered just beneath the surface. My mom exchanged a nervous glance with my dad before answering. He's still at the farm. He wanted to come with us, but we thought it was better if we spoke to you alone first. My dad nodded, shifting uncomfortably. He's been keeping to himself since he admitted everything. I think he knows there's no excuse for what he did. He's ashamed. Ashamed? I repeated, letting out a bitter laugh. That's rich. After months of letting you believe I was a liar? After taking credit for everything I did to keep the farm running? My dad looked down, his face pale. You're right, he said softly. We let it go on far too long. That's on us as much as it is on him. But he wanted us to tell you that he's sorry. He knows he doesn't deserve forgiveness. Oh, he wanted you to tell me? I snapped, leaning forward. Are you serious? You're still protecting him. Even now, he should be here, apologizing to my face. You should have forced him to come. My voice echoed through the small apartment, and I saw the shock on their faces, but I didn't care. I was done tiptoeing around their favoritism. My mom opened her mouth, but I cut her off. Do you even hear yourselves? He lies, manipulates, and twists everything I did into some heroic story for himself. And now, when it's time to take responsibility, you're still shielding him? What? He's too embarrassed to face me, so you're here cleaning up his mess? Do you realize how insane that sounds? My dad shifted uncomfortably, gripping his knees. We thought this would be easier for everyone, he muttered. Easier for who? I shot back. For Jake? For you? Because it sure as hell isn't easier for me. Neither of them had a response. My mom looked down at her hands, nervously twisting the strap of her purse, while my dad stared at the floor, his jaw tight. The silence between us stretched, heavy and suffocating, until finally, my dad stood. You're right, he said quietly, not meeting my eyes. We should have brought him. We should have made him face you. I don't know why we didn't. Maybe because we've been making excuses for him for so long. It's just what we do. My mom followed his lead, clutching her purse to her chest. She looked at me with watery eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. We're sorry, Susan. You deserved better from all of us. Without waiting for a response, they walked toward the door. My dad opened it, pausing for a moment to glance back at me, his face filled with regret. Then they were gone, the door clicking shut behind them. For a long time, I just sat there, the weight of their shame hanging in the room like a ghost. For the first time in my life, it felt like they finally saw the truth. A week later, there was another knock at my door. When I opened it, my stomach turned. Jake was standing there, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, looking as miserable as I'd ever seen him. Susan, he said, his voice low and hesitant, can I come in? For a moment, I considered slamming the door in his face, but instead, I stepped aside, letting him in without a word. He stood awkwardly in the middle of the living room, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He didn't sit or take off his jacket. Finally, he spoke. I came to apologize, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, for everything, for lying, for taking credit for the money you sent, for letting mom and dad treat you the way they did. His voice cracked, but I stayed silent, waiting. I don't have an excuse, he continued. I was jealous of you, Susan. I've always been jealous. You've done so much with your life, and I stayed behind. I thought if I could keep their approval, I'd feel, I don't know, important, but it was wrong, all of it. Jake's voice broke completely, and before I could say anything, he dropped his head into his hands and started to cry, big, heavy sobs that shook his entire body. It wasn't the kind of crying you fake. It was raw, filled with shame. For a moment, I just stood there, unsure of what to say or do. After that day, something shifted. My parents didn't call right away, but when they did, their tone was different. No defensiveness, no excuses. My dad mentioned they'd started handling the farm finances themselves. My mom let it slip that Jake was working to make things right. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. As for Jake, he stayed out of my way after that apology. He didn't try to fix things too quickly, which was fine by me. Trust isn't something you rebuild overnight. But knowing my family finally saw the truth, and the hurt they'd caused, was enough to give me a little peace. My name is Rachel Palmer, and I'm 37 years old. Just last week, I attended a professional gala where I was being honored for my work in research and education. It was a night I'd anticipated for weeks, a celebration of everything I'd built over the years, but as fate would have it, the moment I stepped into the restroom to catch my breath, I came face to face with someone I hadn't seen in nearly 15 years, my mother. She was standing at the sink, reapplying her lipstick, every bit the poised socialite I remembered. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if she'd recognize me, but then her eyes flicked up to the mirror, locking onto my reflection. Her hand froze mid-motion, and I saw her jaw tighten. "Rachel," she said, her voice cool and detached, as if we'd run into each other at a country club instead of a restroom after 15 years of silence. "I didn't expect to see you here." I steadied myself, gripping the edge of my clutch. "I could say the same," I replied evenly. "What brings you here?" She turned to face me, her posture as rigid as ever. "Your father and I were invited." "Of course, we've always supported organizations focused on education." "And you?" she added, her tone laced with mild curiosity. "I'm being honored tonight," I said, meeting her gaze, "for my work in research." Her expression barely shifted, but I caught a flicker of surprise in her eyes before she masked it. "I see," she said, turning back to the mirror. "Well, I suppose everyone finds their way eventually." Her words pulled me back to the day I left that house for the last time. I was 19, and the years leading up to that moment had been anything but easy. In high school, I'd struggled with depression, but in our family, admitting that wasn't an option. "What could you possibly be sad about?" my mother had said when I once tried to confide in her. Her voice was dripping with irritation. "You have everything, more than most kids your age. Stop making excuses." But the truth was, I had been drowning. The pressure to live up to the Palmer name was suffocating. By junior year, my grades were slipping. By senior year, I was barely hanging on. My parents didn't see a teenager in need of help. They saw a failure, an embarrassment. When I only got into a community college, my father's fury was unmatched. "This family has standards," he'd said that night, pacing the living room while I stood clutching my acceptance letter. "And you've done nothing but drag us down. You want to waste your life? Fine, but you'll do it on your own." I was kicked out that night. I can still feel the weight of the duffel bag I carried as I left the house, filled not just with clothes, but the heavy reality of being completely on my own. My parents didn't even say goodbye. My mother remained seated on the couch, scrolling through her phone as if I were invisible. My father disappeared into his study, his ultimatum already delivered. For the first few weeks, I crashed on a friend's pull-out couch while I figured out my next steps. Community college wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I worked part-time at a diner to cover tuition and rent, scraping by until I could afford a tiny studio apartment. It was a grind, balancing classes, shifts at the diner, and the relentless voice in my head that whispered I was a failure. But for the first time, I could breathe, even if the air felt thin. That first year was a blur of late-night study sessions and endless shifts, but it also brought something unexpected: hope. I decided to study chemistry, partly because I loved it, and partly because I wanted to prove to myself, and maybe even to them, that I could excel at something difficult. It wasn't easy. My high school grades had been mediocre, and I felt like I was starting from behind, but for the first time in years, I wasn't crushed under their expectations. I could focus on learning. I still remember my first chemistry exam. I had spent weeks preparing, poring over every formula, every reaction, until I could practically recite them in my sleep. When the professor handed back the graded tests, I hesitated, terrified to look, but there it was, a 92%. I nearly cried right there in the classroom. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I'd earned it. That small victory felt like the first step toward rebuilding myself after everything had fallen apart. Over the years, I evolved in ways I never expected. College wasn't easy, but I learned how to work for what I wanted. The more I gave, the more I grew. By the time I finished my associate's degree, I wasn't just a student anymore. I was someone who had learned how to fight for her place in the world. When I transferred to a 4-year university, the obstacles didn't stop, but I had learned how to face them head-on. The shy, insecure girl who barely scraped by in high school was gone. In her place was someone who could stand in front of a class, explain complex concepts, and hold her own. Chemistry, which had once been a daunting challenge, became my passion. I didn't just want to pass anymore, I wanted to excel, to prove that I wasn't the failure they thought I was. While juggling part-time work, I also interned at local research labs, gaining hands-on experience that eventually led to a life-changing opportunity, becoming a lead researcher at a nonprofit dedicated to advancing science education. It wasn't just a job, it was a mission. I wanted to create a space where other kids, the ones who were told they weren't good enough, could find their way too. Graduating with my bachelor's degree was supposed to be a triumphant moment, but when the day arrived, I realized something painful. My parents hadn't even called, not to congratulate me, not to ask about my plans, nothing. My father, the owner of a massive fertilizer company, had more money than he knew what to do with. He and my mother lived in a mansion, hosted extravagant parties, and rubbed elbows with politicians and CEOs, but for all their wealth, they'd never taken an interest in me unless it was to criticize. Even after I'd graduated with honors, after working tirelessly to get where I was, I didn't exist in their world. To them, I was a reminder of their failure, an inconvenient blemish on their perfect lives. It stung more than I wanted to admit. I had hoped, maybe foolishly, that they'd at least acknowledge my hard work, but they didn't. It was as if I had never mattered to them. That realization hit harder than I expected. The only family member who came to my graduation ceremony was Aunt Lydia, my mother's younger sister. Lydia was the black sheep of the family, shunned for being too eccentric, but she'd always been kind to me. She was the one person who remembered my birthday, even when my parents pretended I didn't exist. When I saw her in the crowd, waving excitedly from the back, a lump formed in my throat. After the ceremony, I found her waiting in the parking lot with a huge bouquet of flowers. "You did it, kid," she said, pulling me into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you." It wasn't much, but it was enough. It wasn't the cold silence I'd grown used to. Aunt Lydia reminded me that family didn't have to mean perfection and that love could come from unexpected places. She didn't care that I hadn't followed the straight path my parents wanted for me. She cared that I'd made it, no matter the hurdles. A few months after graduation, while wrapping up a research project at the university, one of my professors, Dr. Collins, pulled me aside. He was an old-school chemist who spoke about the periodic table like it was poetry. He had noticed my work ethic and persistence. "Rachel," he said, his voice calm and thoughtful, "I've been in touch with some colleagues at Oxford University. They're offering a research opportunity in environmental chemistry, and I think you'd be a perfect fit." At first, I thought he was joking. Oxford? One of the most prestigious universities in the world? Me? But Dr. Collins insisted. "This isn't just a job," he said. "It's a chance to make real contributions to the field. You've earned this. Don't let fear hold you back." His words stayed with me as I filled out the application. I applied hesitantly, not fully believing it could happen. The process was rigorous, and I doubted I'd make the cut. But weeks later, an email arrived. "We are pleased to inform you that you've been awarded a research grant for your proposed work in environmental chemistry at Oxford University." I was stunned. Moving to England felt like stepping into an entirely new world. I didn't tell anyone, not my parents, not my old friends. The only person who knew was Aunt Lydia. A few days before I left for England, I called Aunt Lydia. She was the only person I trusted with the truth. "You've worked too hard to let anything hold you back," she said, her voice steady and encouraging. "Do this for yourself, Rachel." She understood why I needed to disappear, to escape the shadows of my past and carve out a future without the weight of anyone's expectations hanging over me. I asked her not to tell anyone where I was going. I didn't want them to find me, or worse, drag me back into their world of judgment and indifference. So, with nothing but a backpack and a faint hope for a new beginning, I boarded a plane to Oxford. Settling into a tiny flat in the heart of the city, I threw myself into my work. The first few weeks were a blur of adjustment, the language, the culture, the isolation, but as I immersed myself in my research, I began to feel at home. I was part of something bigger now, working on projects that truly mattered, projects with the potential to make a real impact on the world. Chemistry was no longer about proving myself to my parents or anyone else. It was about changing the future. Over time, I completed my master's degree, and the momentum of my research carried me forward, driven by a newfound confidence. I applied for a PhD. The process was grueling, with sleepless nights and endless hours in the lab, but I was determined. I had found my place at Oxford, and I wasn't turning back. Years later, I earned my doctorate, establishing myself as a respected researcher in the field of environmental chemistry. The culmination of my journey felt surreal, especially when I was offered a position as a professor at the University of Cambridge. Cambridge, one of the world's most prestigious institutions. It felt like a dream I had never dared to chase, not because I didn't think I was capable, but because it seemed too far removed from the girl I had once been. At Cambridge, I found a new passion in teaching and mentoring, guiding the next generation of scientists. Sharing the knowledge and resilience I had gained brought me a sense of fulfillment I hadn't anticipated. Standing at the front of a classroom, commanding respect and attention, I often thought of the shy, uncertain girl I had been. That girl had grown into someone I was proud of. Still, a part of me sometimes glanced over my shoulder, wondering if anyone back home knew where I was, or cared enough to find out. My parents had never reached out, not a single call, letter, or email since I left. It was as though I had been erased from their lives. Did they ever think about me? I told myself it didn't matter. I had built my life without them, and their silence only proved how unnecessary their approval had been. But when I saw my mother in that bathroom mirror, the weight of our history came crashing back. Her dismissive words, "Everyone finds their way eventually," rattled in my mind. Did she really believe that? Did she even care about the years I'd spent clawing my way toward the future I had dreamed of? I thought about all the times they'd told me I wasn't good enough, about the cold silence when I left their house, and the years of absence since. It felt like a lifetime ago, but standing there, the bitterness was as sharp as ever. I had worked so hard, leaving everything behind, moving to England, earning my master's and PhD, becoming a professor at Cambridge, and here she was, treating my accomplishments like an afterthought, like they didn't matter, like I didn't matter. When she walked out of the bathroom, poised and distant, I felt a pang of something between anger and release. Watching her disappear back into the crowd, I realized how far I had come. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need their approval. I had built a life on my own terms, and that was enough. The gala began shortly after. The hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses filled the air as I tried to shake off the weight of our encounter. This was my night, the moment I had worked for, fought for. I took a deep breath and stepped into the ballroom, where my name was called. Rachel Palmer, honored for her groundbreaking contributions to education and sustainable chemistry. The applause was deafening as I walked to the stage. The lights bore down on me, illuminating the sea of well-dressed guests. As I stood there, the gravity of the moment hit me. This wasn't just about my work, it was a declaration to the world, to myself, and to anyone who had doubted me. I had proven that I was more than the girl my parents tried to mold and dismiss. I had become someone entirely my own, and that, above all else, was enough. This was it, the moment where I stood on my own, with nothing to prove to anyone but myself. As I tried to absorb the magnitude of it all, the host's voice rang out, pulling the room's attention. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have an exciting announcement," the host began, their tone brimming with anticipation. "In recognition of tonight's groundbreaking work in education and sustainable chemistry, a generous and anonymous donor has pledged a $2 million grant to the recipient of this award." The room fell silent, and I felt every pair of eyes shift toward me. My heart raced as the words settled over me. $2 million. The sheer weight of the number was surreal, almost too overwhelming to comprehend. This wasn't just recognition. It was a life-changing gesture of trust and belief in someone's potential. But it wasn't mine, at least, not officially, not yet. The host continued, "This extraordinary contribution is intended to support the recipient's continued research efforts and to further their impact in education." I blinked, stunned, as the words echoed in the room. The announcement wasn't directly for me, it was for the recipient of the award, whose name had yet to be revealed. Still, the atmosphere shifted, and I couldn't help but notice the charged energy in the air. This wasn't just an award, it was a transformation for whoever received it. As I tried to process everything, my gaze wandered over the crowd, their faces a mixture of anticipation and polite admiration. Then I saw him, near the back, beside the exit. My father stood up abruptly, his face twisted with something that looked like disgust. For a brief moment, our eyes met. Then he turned sharply and made his way toward the door, his movements swift and deliberate. He didn't even stay to hear my name. I froze. Anger, disbelief, and a sharp pang of bitterness rose in my chest. This was the moment I had dreamed of, validation for everything I'd worked for, An acknowledgement of my journey, and he couldn't even bring himself to remain in the room. The man who had rejected me, kicked me out of his house, and dismissed my dreams was walking away, just as the pinnacle of my success unfolded. The host's voice broke through my thoughts. We are incredibly fortunate to not only have a generous donor for tonight's award, but also a longtime supporter of education and sustainable chemistry. This $2 million grant, made possible by Mosaic Fertilizers, is a testament to the power of innovation and dedication in advancing our field. Mosaic Fertilizers, my father's company. I felt the air leave my lungs as realization struck. The donor funding this grant, the crowning achievement of my career, was tied to the man who had spent years undermining my dreams. The irony was almost too much to bear. He hadn't known it would be me standing on that stage. His contribution had been anonymous, routed through the foundation. He thought he was funding someone else, someone he could be proud of. Instead, it was me. My chest tightened as I tried to keep my composure. The applause around me was deafening, yet it felt distant, like a dull hum pressing against my ears. I stepped forward to the microphone, managing a shaky, "Thank you." The words felt empty, too small for what I was feeling. As the applause faded, I couldn't stay. I turned and walked off the stage, slipping through the crowd and out the back door. My feet moved on instinct, my heart racing. I couldn't let this end like this, not with him walking away from the very moment that should have silenced all his doubts. Pushing open the door to the cool night air, I spotted him standing by his car. His back was to me, shoulders stiff with tension. My feet carried me forward before I could think twice. "Dad," I called, my voice cracking. He didn't turn at first. When he finally did, his expression was bitter, the same look I remembered from all those years ago. "What is it now, Rachel?" His voice was sharp, cold. "You think I'm going to congratulate you? Celebrate the fact that you're taking my money?" I stopped a few feet away, my chest heaving. "I didn't know it came from you," I said evenly, "and I didn't ask for it." He sneered. "No? Well, it's yours now. Enjoy it, but it doesn't change a thing. You're still the failure I kicked out of my house. No grant, no award will fix that." The words hit me like a slap, but this time, they didn't cut as deep. I looked him in the eye, steady and unflinching. "I don't need it to. I built my life without you, and I'll keep building it. This grant isn't about you, it's about what I've earned." For a moment, he said nothing, then, with a dismissive shake of his head, he turned and got into his car. I stood there as he drove away, the sound of the engine fading into the distance. That night, I made a decision. The $2 million grant wasn't my victory, it was a reminder of everything I had left behind. I donated the entire amount, every last cent, to fund scholarships for underprivileged students. They deserved a chance to create their own future, free from the burdens of judgment and expectation. As I pressed the final confirmation on the donation, I felt a quiet sense of peace. My father's money didn't define me, his approval didn't validate me. My legacy would be my own, and that was worth far more than any grant. "I'm sorry, it's just, you have to understand, I never meant for this to happen," I stammered, my voice shaking. "Is this true?" I asked, turning to my sister, my gaze burning with disbelief and anger. "This isn't the right time for that," she replied hastily. "Lily should have been your priority," I shot back, my voice rising. In that moment, I realized my hand was trembling, raised as if to lash out at both of them. I froze. I had never felt so cold, so devoid of compassion. This was a side of me I never wanted to see, an experience I hoped never to relive. But because of my careless husband and selfish sister, I now carried a memory I could never erase, a memory that would haunt me forever. It all started with a simple promise. My sister had asked me, no, she had forced me, to pick up my niece, Lily, from preschool that day. "Please, just do it this once," she had pleaded, "and tomorrow too." "Why is it always so urgent with you?" I had snapped. "You're a stay-at-home mom, you have time." "That's not the point," she retorted. As she spoke, I could hear Lily coughing faintly in the background. "Is Lily sick?" I asked, my concern deepening. "No, she's fine," my sister replied dismissively. "She just coughed a little. Anyway, can you keep her for a while? Like, a week?" "A week? Are you serious?" "I can't." "Well, if you won't, I'm leaving her at the preschool. If no one picks her up, she can just stay there," she interrupted coldly. I gritted my teeth. "You're unbelievable," I muttered, finally agreeing for Lily's sake, though resentment boiled within me. The next morning, I got a call from Lily's preschool much earlier than I had expected. The voice on the other end was frantic. "We've been trying to reach your sister, but she isn't answering. Lily has a fever, and she lost consciousness. She's being rushed to the hospital by ambulance." Panic shot through me as I ended the call and sped to the hospital, but it was too late. The weight of that day crushed me. I had been married for 6 years, yet I had no children of my own. My husband and I had started family planning as soon as we got married, but we hadn't been successful. Meanwhile, my sister had a baby 2 years ago. After her divorce, she began dumping her responsibilities on me whenever she could. "It's good practice for when you have a child of your own," she would say casually, as if Lily were a doll I could borrow and return. I didn't like her attitude, but I adored my niece. She was bright and sweet, and I had always wanted to be there for her. That day, however, everything changed. My heart broke in a way I never thought possible, and I vowed that I would never let my sister's selfishness or my husband's indifference pull me into such a situation again. "I'm going to take care of my niece again tomorrow," I told my husband. "Can I ask for your help?" He hesitated. "Actually, I have an urgent problem at work. I need to fly out early tomorrow morning for a business trip." "Really?" I tried not to sound disappointed. "Yeah," he said, his tone apologetic. "It's a client I've known for a long time, and while it won't affect the contract, I'm in charge of sales. I need to handle this personally." I nodded, masking my frustration. "Okay, well, be careful. Are you sure I'll be okay on my own? If it's too much, I can go to my parents' place." "I'm sure you'll manage," he said, trying to reassure me. "Thanks for understanding. Have a safe day with Lily." "Thanks," I replied, forcing a smile. "Have a safe trip." At the time, I thought it was just bad luck. My niece, Lily, was deeply attached to my husband. The last time I cared for her, she cried all night until my husband held her and calmed her down. I'd believed that if anything happened, he'd be there for her again. But, of course, work comes first. I told myself I was prepared to handle whatever came, even if it left me utterly exhausted. The next day, everything spiraled out of control. I received a call from Lily's preschool. Panic surged through me as I rushed to the hospital, where I found her small body connected to tubes, lying unconscious. The preschool teachers were visibly shaken. The director approached me, her face etched with worry and anger. "You're Lily's aunt, right? Her mother's sister?" "Yes, that's correct," I answered. "We've been trying to contact your sister, but we haven't been able to reach her. We even called her workplace, but they told us she's on vacation. Do you know where she is?" "She's overseas," I said, my voice heavy. The director's eyes widened in shock. "I see," she said after a moment, her voice tight with frustration. "Let me explain what happened today." She recounted the morning's events. Lily had arrived at preschool looking flushed. During the routine temperature check, they found her daily temperature log was blank, something that was supposed to be filled out at home. The preschool refused to admit her without this completed, but when they took her temperature, it read 37.8 degrees Celsius, above the school's threshold of 37.5 degrees Celsius. The director had instructed my sister to take Lily home. However, my sister dismissed their concerns. "Her temperature is always high," she had insisted. "She's fine." Ignoring the teacher's protests, she left Lily at the preschool and walked away. When Lily's condition worsened, the school attempted to contact my sister repeatedly. When they couldn't reach her, they called my parents, but my parents were at work, unavailable during the day. Desperate, they dug up an old emergency contact form from a year ago, which had my number listed. That's when they called me. The director's voice trembled as she concluded, her face pale with distress. "This should never have happened. Lily's in the hospital now." Her eyes glistened with tears, reflecting the weight of the situation. I stood there, staring at my niece, her small form fragile and pale against the hospital bed. My heart felt like it was shattering into a million pieces. "I'm so sorry, I'll contact my sister immediately," I said, bowing my head in apology to the director and the chaperone. After thanking them for their efforts, I sent them back to the school. I tried calling my sister right away, but the line was disconnected. I called again, and again, dozens of times, hundreds, but she never picked up. Meanwhile, my parents rushed to the hospital after I informed them of Lily's condition. "It's going to be okay, Lily's going to be okay," my mother kept saying, almost like a mantra, as though saying it enough times might make it true. "Don't worry," she added, her voice trembling. "We're in a hospital, they'll take care of her." But the treatment didn't help. Her symptoms worsened with every passing moment, and still, I kept dialing my sister's number, desperate for her to answer. 2 days later, Lily's small, fragile life slipped away. A 2-year-old child, gone, alone, without the warmth of her mother's embrace. How could something so heartless, so cruel, happen? Tears streamed down my face as I held her tiny, cold body in my arms. Why? I whispered hoarsely to no one in particular. Why didn't I ask where my sister was traveling? Why didn't I stop her from leaving? Guilt consumed me. I couldn't help but blame myself. It's not your fault, my mother said softly, placing a hand on my shoulder, but even as she spoke, her tears fell freely. I tried again and again to contact my husband, desperate to tell him what had happened, but I couldn't reach him either. Time, indifferent to our grief, marched on. In the end, I had to arrange and hold a funeral for Lily without any word from my sister. The day of the funeral coincided with her return from her trip. I clung to my phone, ready to answer the moment she called. During the funeral, as the monks chanted their solemn sutras, my phone vibrated in my hand. I picked it up without hesitation. "Oh, hello," came her chipper voice. "Thanks for taking care of Lily. I just arrived at the airport and am on my way home. Oh, by the way, what kind of souvenir would you like?" I froze, my grip on the phone tightened. I hissed through clenched teeth. "What? I can't hear you," she replied. My voice broke, trembling with rage and grief. "What are you doing? Lily, she's gone, she died." The chanting stopped as my voice echoed through the room. "What?" she said, her tone bewildered. "What are you mad about?" "Mad?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You took a child's life. Do you even know how lonely she was? How scared?" "Oh no, her voice faltered. "Right," I said bitterly, "it's not funny, none of us are laughing." I struggled to control my emotions, exhaling deeply several times to calm myself. "I'm in the middle of Lily's funeral," I said coldly. "Get back here, now." Without waiting for her response, I hung up the phone. "I'm sorry," I whispered, breaking the silence and apologizing for interrupting the chanting. The monk, his expression calm and understanding, gently placed his hand on my head in a gesture of comfort. After the funeral, as I prepared to leave for the crematorium, my sister arrived, out of breath. To my shock, my husband was with her, standing just a step behind. It couldn't be, no. My sister collapsed in tears by Lily's small body. "Why?" she wailed, her sobs echoing in the solemn space. Behind her, my husband stood frozen, his face a mask of guilt and disbelief. The other relatives looked at her with quiet disdain, but no one voiced their anger, out of respect for Lily, I assumed. I couldn't bring myself to speak to either of them, not yet. After the cremation, we returned to my parents' house. There, my sister faced the brunt of my parents' fury. They scolded her relentlessly while I sat in silence, my gaze drifting to their luggage. Something about it felt off. My eyes focused on the airline sticker attached to the handle of her carry-on. Both bags bore identical labels from the same destination. I froze. "Why were you both at the same airport?" I asked, my voice trembling. My sister's mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked cornered. Finally, my husband spoke. "I'm sorry, it's just, as you see. I didn't mean for this to happen." "Is this true?" I asked my sister, my voice icy. "This isn't the right time for that," she muttered. "No," I said, my voice rising. "This isn't about you. Lily should have come first, always." I hadn't even realized my hand had risen toward them both in anger, but I stopped myself. It wasn't their infidelity that filled me with rage, it was the way they had disregarded my niece, their selfishness that led to her death. "You don't get to cry," I spat at my sister. "You don't have the right. Do you know how many times I called you? Hundreds of times. How hard is it to imagine that something could happen to your child?" I turned to my husband. "And you knew she was sick, while you two indulged in your disgusting affair. Lily was suffering, she died, alone and scared." My voice broke. "You'll never be forgiven, never. Both of you deserve to rot in hell for what you've done." Neither my parents nor the relatives stopped me. My mother's voice, cold as steel, cut through the room. "You are not my daughter anymore. Don't you dare show your face here again." My sister's tear-streaked face crumbled. Why am I the only one being blamed?" "You're not family to me," I said flatly. She left the house, her head bowed, without even taking Lily's ashes. Later, my husband and I finalized our divorce. He agreed to give me everything, shared assets, alimony, all of it, silent and guilt-ridden. He didn't contest a thing. It didn't matter. No amount of money or remorse could undo the past. Both my sister and my husband faced criminal charges after the preschool director reported them for child neglect and abuse. My sister fought her case with a court-appointed attorney, but no one stood by her side, not even our parents. She received a 5-year prison sentence. My husband, who knew about Lily's fever and abandonment, was sentenced to 2 years. 7 years combined for a lost life. How is that justice? It will never be enough. 6 years have passed since then. I've remarried and have a child of my own now, a child who has helped heal the wounds left by those terrible days. I will never forget my niece, Lily. Her memory will always stay with me. They say sins never go away, that they remain a burden one carries forever. My sister and my ex-husband deserve to carry theirs. But even so, it will never be enough. Human life is precious,